Hey Denchbags, what's going on? It's Landon Remixes here, and it is time for my review of the newest EP from Crywolf. This one is called Skeletons. I think it might be because I cover all of Eden's content on this channel, and him and Crywolf are very much in the same vein of music and also have made music together in the past, that my subscriber base seems to have a very unhealthy obsession with Crywolf's music. Crywolf is by far the most requested artist I've ever had since I've started doing these reviews. Most of those requests being for me to review his debut album Cataclasm, but then there was also a request for me to do a top 10 Crywolf video, and then actually the first request I ever got to review Crywolf was for his EP Dysphoria, which was kind of the precursor to Cataclasm. So interestingly enough, Crywolf has been one of the only artists that I've regularly stayed into since you guys have requested for me to cover him. And it just so happens to be that this new EP, Skeletons, has been my first big opportunity to actually cover Crywolf more in depth than just mentioning him, because I have mentioned him a few different times in this channel, usually in the context of other artists in that indietronic vein, like Eden and Steven. And I do have to take a brief moment of honesty. Out of all the indietronica artists I've covered on my channel, from Eden and Steven to artists like Yo Mace to Porter Robinson, Crywolf is probably my least favorite of the bunch. And before you guys pick up those stones to start throwing them at me, I do have to disclaim that this is all based on personal opinion. I think he's a fantastic producer and furthermore a musician, and I completely understand the hype around his music. I get why you guys love him so much, especially if you're into people like Eden. And I guess what's pushed me away more than anything when it comes to Crywolf is surprisingly his vocals. Instead of coming off in a really balanced and well-blended way, a lot of Crywolf's music seems to be this really awkward contrast between these dark, mysterious, harmonious, rock-influenced instrumentals and these kind of whiny, high-pitched pop vocals. And that's not to say that this is the case for every single Crywolf song, because that simply just would not be true. It's just most of my favorites by him are probably going to be the songs that he doesn't stretch too high into that ridiculous vocal range. For example, I'd use the song Stomach It, his collaboration with Eden. For the most of that song, Crywolf's vocals stay pretty low in the range. If you listen to the acoustic version, though, he does get pretty high in those spots, and I absolutely love it when Crywolf's vocals just break, and I feel like I can take him so much more seriously in the context of listening to him, almost like a rock album or something like that. So that's the kind of vibe that I want to get from his music. But in a lot of these cases, like I said, you just get those weird contrasting elements. And I don't want to disappoint you guys by saying this, but I will most likely not be going back to review Cataclasm. As a supporter and a fan of Crywolf's music, I have the album, and of course I do enjoy it to an extent, but do I think it's an absolutely monumental album or something like truly groundbreaking for a debut album? No, not necessarily. And with the Skeletons EP, it kind of feels like a more condensed, possibly more electronic influenced version of the album. And this is very present on the EP's first two tracks, the intro, Lemniscate, the place between sleeping and awake, and the second track, Quantum Immortality, which was one of the first singles that was released from this thing. Both are very heavily pulling, it feels like, from Crywolf's dubstep days. Lemniscate is easily one of my favorites on the EP, in large part because it seems to tell a story almost entirely by itself. It hops between its really soft and tender beginning, which is filled with piano chords and little plucks, to its very rock-centered electric guitar-fueled chorus, to a more cinematic section toward the end, and then finishing off with a more kind of atmospheric vibe, which leads perfectly into Quantum Immortality, which is very much more probably R&B influenced. And just to be clear with what I said about Crywolf's vocals earlier, I think his vocals work very well with a song like this. I think when it's got more of that pop and electronic inspiration behind it, I think those two kind of things work very well together. But on some of these songs on this EP and on the last album as well, it just seems like he's really going for that huge cinematic sound, and I almost feel like he should just leave it alone and let it be an instrumental, because a lot of those are really great. For example, the song Fuse, which if it would have been left as an instrumental, probably would have been one of my easy favorites on the EP. I guess I just kind of have a hard time taking Crywolf seriously when he's got these going into these much more epic instrumental breaks later in the track. And honestly, I think toward the end of the track, when he lets his vocals kind of play the background, if he just used them as more atmospheric elements in songs like this, I feel like that would work a lot better. But otherwise, I feel like in large part his vocals on the song don't really do much for it and kind of distract me from the beauty of the harmonious nature of the rest of his music and how epic those instrumentals truly are, which are some of my favorite parts about this EP. I just want to say this since I didn't mention it earlier. I absolutely do think Skeletons is a step up from his debut Cataclasm, like I mentioned earlier in the review, just because it's a much more condensed and electronic influenced of that album, I feel like. A big part as well with that is that Crywolf has a couple vocal guests in a much shorter time frame, with an unnamed female singer on Quantum Immortality, and then the up-and-comer Mothika featuring on the song Silk, both of whose appearances I liked quite a bit, not to downplay Echo's appearance on Cataclasm. Especially Mothika, who I think is an excellent pairing with Crywolf's more R&B influenced style that comes out on Silk. The song Wait, which I actually think was the last single to be released off this EP, correct me if I'm wrong, but I didn't actually really listen to the songs prior to this EP's release. It's the big acoustic ballad, actually the only one on the EP, but that, honestly, the emotion of this is kind of drained out by just the countless layers of reverb that are put on this one, just about on every single track. I had a really hard time focusing on the actual elements of this thing just because it's so spacey because of that reverb. If the song would have been a little drier compared to the rest of the EP, it probably would have stuck out to me a little more, but honestly, this one made for one of my least favorites on it, and that's kind of sad because I feel like the lyrics on this one are some of the most haunting out of the entire project. Alternatively, the following song, Windswept, is easily one of my favorites on this EP. Starting off with these layered choir vocals and then slowly progressing into a much more cinematic influence drop, kind of just like Fuse did. Probably my favorite part about this song, though, comes about 4 minutes and 30 seconds into it, where Crywolf's voice just completely breaks, and he doesn't seem to be worrying about staying in key or anything like that. He's just letting the emotion kind of flow out of him, and that's really what I was trying to get at earlier when it comes to Crywolf's thing, is that when you hear things like this, it's honestly inspiring to me because it's something different. He's not worrying about these huge pop things and trying to get his vocal melodies right. He's just getting real and emotional, and I feel like that's a great part about his music and a great part about this song. And then the EP closes on a bit of an odd note with the title track Skeletons. It's by far the shortest song on the EP, and in fact it is a snippet of the song Fuse, but reversed, and I'm not totally understanding the whole concept of that, especially when it's titled so differently and doesn't really appear to make any other kinds of references to the song. I really don't feel like this was a huge creative push, just kind of reversing it, although I don't 100% know the same production and everything was reversed because I wasn't able to listen to a technical reversed version of the song. I just saw on Genius, in fact, that the lyrics of this thing were reversed. I don't know for sure that the instrumental was, but I feel like when you want to do something with the concept of reversing, probably do some kind of new content so people can find something new to hear. Why would I want to hear the lyrics of a song that's already been earlier in the EP, just played again but reversed? Perhaps it's influencing listeners to take this EP and listen to the whole thing in reverse, because actually in the original Fuse there is a slightly reversed section which contains some of the darkest lyrics on the EP. Other than that, I really don't see much of a point to this track. If you want to use reverse elements in a song, that's absolutely fine, just don't rehash the same material and put it under a different name. Not cool. I'm sorry if I disappointed you guys by not being super in love with this EP. Like I said, a lot of it's just my personal taste and what I think about Crywolf as an artist and the kind of styles he uses and mashes them together. I don't necessarily think they work in the best way, but I think Crywolf definitely has potential to make some seriously amazing stuff, especially after this EP, which I think is a moderately big step up from his debut album. For Skeletons, I am feeling a strong 7 to a light 7.5. You guys, if you haven't listened to this EP, I would highly suggest it because, like I said, there is some great content on here, and if you aren't already a fan of Crywolf, this might make you one. As always, I'm Landon Remixes. I hope you guys enjoyed this review, and I will catch you later. Peace.